I have no idea what to say for this intro. Turning pages, keep turning those pages. Time flies when you've been reading for ages. Hi, I'm Vanessa, and I just wrote a book this past year. The last 2 books I've written took me a total of 5 years combined. I alternated between the 2, and that time also included revisions and things, but like details. If you happen to have been around on this channel at the beginning of this year, you might remember that I did a video announcing to the World Wide Web that I was going to attempt to write a book in 6 months. Things didn't quite go as planned. The book still got written, don't you worry. But I thought it might be interesting to share the details of what exactly happened during this video and some of the lessons that I learned along the way. So let's jump right into the word count statistics, and I think the numbers might help explain some things. So the plan was to write around 3,500 words a week, roughly 14,000 words a month, from January through June, with a couple weeks left in there for planning if I needed it. My original plan for the book was 110,000 words. The book actually ended up being 117,000 words, which could account for some extra time, but not... well, you'll see. So I needed more time. And so much more. Why is it that I'm never about to sneeze when I turn on the camera, and then once I start talking, like... So I was pretty on track for the first 3 months. I wrote a total of 38,700 words from January through March, which averaged out at 13,000 words a month. But the next 3 months, I only wrote about half that. So from April through June, I wrote 19,610 words total, which averaged at about 6,500 words a month. And then in July through September, my progress decreased by half again. So I wrote a total of 11,100 words from July through September. That's not per month, unfortunately, and averaged at 3,700 words a month. Which actually I thought it was worse than that. I thought I didn't write anything, but numbers don't lie. Or they could if I was lying, but then this video would be completely pointless. And then I finished the draft on November 5th this year, 2020, and from October through November 5th, I wrote 15,000 words. I think I vlogged all of that, or at least most of that, on my finishing my novel vlogs that just came out this past October? Yeah, pretty sure it was October. It has to have been October, because that's when I was... Get it together. Should have put everything in the script, but I left some of it in my notebook, and now I'm confused, apparently. So, the year of 2020, up through November 5th, I wrote 84,500 words of my Chosen One Comedy Book 2, my current work in progress. And I technically started the book at the end of 2019. If you remember that I said the book was 117,000 words at this moment, but I still pretty much wrote the whole book in a span of a year, so I'm counting it as writing it in a year. So what caused my progress to keep taking these drastic nosedives? I think it was a combination of things that I'm going to start listing here. 1, I got tired and stressed. I remember during the first 3 months of the year, I was hyper-focused on progress and finishing the draft in the arbitrary time frame that I'd set for myself. Also, I think starting around April, which was the start of the decline in my progress, that was when I reached the point in my outline that I hadn't planned as much. I had the beginning very well planned, and then the middle, I was like, I'll get there eventually. So I didn't have enough details, and I kept getting stuck and having to take longer than I had anticipated to brainstorm and plan things. And because of this, I'd start falling behind schedule, I'd feel frustrated, and just not want to write as a result. Also, in the middle of June, right before my months with the lowest word count, was when I really started making my health a priority. I'd gotten in some pretty bad eating habits while I was hyper-focused on my book in the beginning of the year, so I decided to start eating healthier and exercising, and so I made exercising a priority above writing, which is probably why I didn't write as much, because I wanted to make sure I exercised like at least 4 times a week. Being productive is all well and good, but your physical well-being is more important. And another thing that slowed me down, forcing myself to only work on the one project. Normally I switch between projects, but this year I decided to try and focus all of my attention on one priority novel so I could finish a book faster. My system was that if I completed my word goal for the day or week for my priority novel, then and only then was I allowed to work on my quote secondary novel. And most of the time I was barely or not even meeting my goals for my priority novel. So my secondary novel, Poor Magi and Sorcerers, usually went ignored. I think I wrote maybe like a couple thousand words of that novel the whole year. I feel so bad for it. And even worse, because of this rule that I'd created for myself, the times when I was stuck on my priority novel and not writing for weeks on end, I still felt like I was supposed to be working on that book. Whereas normally, if I'm stuck on one book, I would just switch to the other book. So I ended up writing like very little or nothing at all, rather than at least making progress in a different project. So I think I'll actually go back to this novel rotation system that I invented a few years ago, where I switch back and forth between 2 different books for intervals of about 2 weeks at a time on each book. I don't know a way to phrase that makes more sense. I think it's still confusing. 2 weeks, one book, switch to next book for 2 weeks, go back and forth. That system worked really well for me in the past and helped me from getting too stuck on one story because I actually had a limited time where I was allowed to work on it and then I'd have to switch. But overall, this attempt to write a book in 6 months, but actually writing a book in a year, was a really interesting experience. And even though it did take like twice as long as I originally planned, I did still finish a book in over twice as long. Wait, this is like that line from Lord of the Rings where it's like, I know half of you half as much as I'd like, and I like less than half of you half as much as you deserve, or something like that. Even though it took longer than I planned, I still wrote a book twice as fast as I had ever done in the past. It's good to push yourself to break your own records. Even if you end up pushing yourself to your limit, it's still good to know what those limits are. Within reason and obviously like personal safety, and don't hurt yourself. I mean, stay safe and be smart, but like, writing-wise, it's okay to push yourself. So my main takeaways for any of you watching this video that wants to apply what I learned about myself to their own writing endeavors are as follows. I'm like way too serious. I don't know what's going on. 1. Set yourself easier goals. You'll feel so much more motivated if you surpass an easier goal than if you're barely keeping up with a harder one. Burnout is no one's friend. And for the love of your novel, factor in time to plan and outline if you're the type of writer that uses outlines. That last one was number 2. Number 3, don't be afraid to experiment with your writing routines. I always wondered if I was somehow hurting my own productivity by always writing 2 books at one time. I really wanted to see if I could crank out one book faster by putting all of my energy into it. And while I did write one book faster than I ever have in the past, I still think working on multiple projects is what helps me best to avoid writer's block. But I'm actually really happy to have that confirmation. And 4, speaking of routines, it's also really helpful to figure out the least stressful method of tracking your progress. I focused a lot on word count in this specific video because I think it's the easiest tracking method for other writers to understand. But earlier this year, I actually did a whole video on how focusing on the time I spend writing rather than hitting a weekly or daily word count goal actually helps me focus and overall be more productive and less stressed at the same time. It's crazy. So test out different things and see what works for you. I hope this video was helpful or at least interesting to some of you. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. And in the comments, I'd love to know what's the best thing that's happened to you this week or this month. Bye!